You know, just a few years ago, if you wanted a wide-angle lens for real estate work or for vlogging, you only had really one choice, and that was this guy right here, the Laowa 9mm. Now, fantastic lens, and I've used it on real estate shoots before, but if there was one drawback about this lens, well, first off, it comes in at $500. You can sometimes find it on sale for $4 or $399. But this one here is a manual lens. But let me introduce you to the new lens from Viltrox. It is their 9mm f2.8 autofocus lens for your APS-C or Super 35. Is it any good? Oh yeah. And a quick little disclaimer, Viltrox, they did send me this lens to test out. They did not pay me for this review. They didn't tell me what to say, and they don't get to see this video before it's released. That's the way my relationship with Viltrox has always been. They allow me to say whatever I want to about their products. So let's talk about this 9mm lens. Well, you know, 9mm gives you a 13.5mm full frame equivalent on an APS-C lens, and it also gives you an impressive 113.8 degree field of view. This lens has 13 elements in 11 groups, has a 58mm front filter thread. It's made primarily of plastic. There's no button or switches, just a manual focus ring that is very smooth and well dampened. The rear is metal with electronics, has a USB Type-C port for firmware updates, and there's no weather sealing. Now, autofocus on this is achieved via a STM stepper motor that I gotta say is virtually silent, and its minimum focus distance is just 5.16 inches, so you can get really close to a subject. Well, you know, they say that the proof is always in the performance, so I'm gonna show you some examples of this Viltrox 9mm on my Sony FX30, and then I'm gonna compare it with the Sony 11mm autofocus lens, and then for giggles, I'm going to throw the Laowa on the FX30 just so you can see a little comparison between the three. And then I'm going to put this Viltrox 9mm on my studio camera, which is the Sony ZV-E10 Mark II. Now, normally the video that you see right now is with the Viltrox 13mm, and I like that because it gives you just enough wide of an angle, and there's a pro to wide angle, and I'll get into that a little bit later on. But first off, let's see some comparisons on the FX30. Ready, set, go.
Play it safe, keep the feelings away. Too late, now I'm falling again. My mistake was that I even stayed.
Okay, now we're looking at the Sony 11mm f1.8, and you can see exactly how far away I am from the camera. I can reach out and touch the lens right there, and 11mm is really nice. But we'll also look at the Laowa 9mm. With this Viltrox 9mm, this is exactly how close that I am. If you look at the camera, the Go Ultra, it's recording how far that I am. I'm touching the lens. I can get this close and still be in focus, which is kind of crazy. So if you're looking for a real estate lens to really get that wide field of view, or if you like to vlog, hey, this is the lens to check out. But let's look at the Laowa just to see, because the Laowa was really the lens to get if you were thinking about doing real estate work. But let's look at it 9mm compared to this Viltrox 9mm. And now this is the Laowa 9mm, and it was really brought to fame because it was a no distortion, so you didn't have to worry about getting a fisheye look. And yes, you can get really close, but it's a manual lens, so you would have to manually focus. Let me try to get that in. I got my focus peaking on the FX30 right now. But you would have to manually focus this lens, or you could put it on infinity, but on infinity, it wasn't perfect. So having an autofocus lens is really just, for me, a standout feature of this Viltrox 9mm. So hand holding the Sony FX30 with this Viltrox 9mm. Now granted, it is an f2.8. It's not an f1.8 like the Sony lens, but with an f2.8 you can still get a nice separation, a nice blurry background with this. And the autofocus works really, really well on this camera. And it's actually virtually silent. I mean, look how wide this is. Look how wide that is. Autofocus test. Viltrox 9mm. So you can see, I mean, it's definitely a nice wide lens. You can get really up close to this. Now, what I'm going to do, like I said, I've got the 13mm Viltrox on the Sony ZV-E10 Mark II, and I'm going to switch it out for this 9mm, and let's do that now. Bam! Okay, 9mm Viltrox. Now, I do have the ISO set to, what is that, 250 to accommodate for the f1.4 on the Viltrox 13mm. Let's change the ISO real quick just so we can have a fair comparison. Is this 9mm Viltrox lens, is it worth it? Absolutely, 100%, 2 thumbs up, and I'll tell you why. Because this lens is so versatile, considering that it's autofocus. You can use it for vlogging, you can use it for real estate work, and you can use it for YouTube. And you may be wondering what I mean by for YouTube. I mean, if you're in a studio space and it happens to be smaller than what you would like, it's not this large thing like what Peter Lindgren has, which is a ginormous studio, but your studio is smaller. If you were to use a 35mm on your APS-C camera, or even on a full frame, it will make your video look like this. Yeah, all face. So this way with the 9mm, you get a lot of coverage. And when I say real estate, I don't mean like real estate, a house, but real estate, the width, the field of view that you get. When you think that you can stick this in a small studio, have the camera up close to you with an f2.8, it may not be a 1.4 like this 13mm by Viltrox, but that 2.8 will still give you a nice blurry background, and it'll give you just enough bokeh to really add that nice touch to your videos. So, do I think it's worth it? Absolutely. I'm going to put product links down in the description below so that you guys can check it out for yourself. And I'll also put a link to this 13mm f1.4 if you're interested in that, because that's my normal studio setup. And as always, I'll catch you in the next review. Bye-bye.